Hey Covenant, my name is Pastor Griffey, the Associate Director of Discipleship, and this is Wednesday Rewind. This past week, Pastor Darren wrapped up our series, A Seat at the Table, by looking at a particular scene with Jesus and his disciples. They go through these fields and they're gleaning wheat, but it happens to be on the Sabbath, and the Pharisees are offended by this. They kind of see this as work, which is, kind of taboo on the Sabbath, and their understanding. We really wrapped around this idea of religion and relationship, or presence over people. It was these two ways that the Pharisees kind of put a fence around the law, and they really protected themselves from getting anywhere close to kind of breaking it. But we looked at it because the law became their religion. The law became everything, and they kind of shirked the idea of helping people or doing anything that would get anywhere close to breaking this law that God had given them. And what Jesus talks about is that when David enters the temple as he's running and fleeing from Saul, that he goes to the priest and he eats the consecrated bread. And Jesus kind of affirms that this was an okay thing to do because he uses that as an example. What I want to do is want to go back into 1 Samuel and this scene of when this takes place, as we look at some kind of different things at play here. Again, David kind of breaks the law, but Jesus affirms that was an okay thing to do. And I'll bring us a little forward and kind of discuss why that matters. So this is 1 Samuel 21, and we're going to read 1 through 6. David went to Nob to Ahimelech the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he met him and asked, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" David answered Ahimelech the priest, "The king sent me on a mission and said to me, 'No one is to know anything about the mission I am sending you on. As for my men, I have told them to meet me at a certain place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find.' But the priest answered David, 'I don't have any ordinary bread on hand. However, there is some consecrated bread here, provided the men have kept themselves for women.' David replied, 'Indeed, women have been kept from us, as usual whenever I set out. The men's bodies are holy even on missions that are not holy. How much more so today?' So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by the bread on the day it was taken away." So as you read here, David is on the run. He has been anointed the new king of Israel. Saul is the current king of Israel. And Saul kind of realizes that David is about to usurp his throne. He's obviously upset about that, frustrated, and he's trying to come find David and kill him. David's on the lam, he's running away, and he goes into this temple, goes to the priest and says, "Hey, we have no food. Do you have anything to give us?" The priest says, "Yes, we have some food, but it's been consecrated. It's this bread, this special bread that has been set apart." And I kind of read some commentaries. I'm really interested because Jesus affirms in what we read this past Sunday in the sermon that this is an okay thing for David to do. And they have a lot of different prevailing theories on that. But the one I think makes the most sense is where the priest says this. He says, it's just the text says, "Since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away." So this was older bread that was able to be given to David. And I think that's where Jesus is really challenging the Pharisees. If they're putting this fence around the law, if they're putting this entire protection in place, they're like, no, you cannot touch this bread no matter what. Now this bread had already served its purpose at the time, and now it's being used to bless this future king of Israel. And Jesus is affirming that's an okay thing to do. Like, we don't have to be so laser focused on this law that we shun being able to help somebody else. And I think that's really interesting, is that we had the Bible recap dinner, I think it was the beginning of June, and we had a woman come from a Jewish synagogue and talk to us about kind of contemporary Judaism. What do Jews believe now? And she kind of gave us some of these contemporary beliefs that Jews now follow. It seems very interesting that they have updated some of their things and their laws to now work around really what we've been looking at a couple of times in the seat at the table, where Jesus is challenging Pharisees and their ideas that you've got to do it this way, you've got to do it this way. So what this woman told us is that really modern Judaism, as they look at something like the Sabbath, as they are allowed to break Sabbath in certain specific occasions, it's either to help someone, to protect someone from harm, and there are a handful of other things that they're allowed to break Sabbath for. Now, in my mind, when she kind of sent me her outline and we looked at this and talked it over, I really want to challenge and be like, well, why did the Jews change their mind on that? I would have to say that it's because Jesus challenges the Pharisees a lot of the times about these Sabbath beliefs. Like, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. But Jesus is saying, like, and we read it on Sunday, if your donkey or your mule or your horse falls into a hole on Sabbath, like, you're just going to leave it there? If something happens to your child, you're just going to let them be hurt? Like, no, you're going to help. You're going to help preserve that life, as the modern Judaism would say. Right now, what we're looking at, this scene from 1 Samuel where David is in need, this preservation of life is applicable because the priest gives him the food that has been previously consecrated. Now, if we're looking at the letter of the law, what the rule is, absolutely not, you should not touch that bread. The priest recognizes in this moment, this man could die if we do not give him this bread. And so he breaks the law. He breaks the law as it is written so that he can allow for the preservation of life. And that's really this message that Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, like, hey, let's not get so laser focused on the do's and the do nots that we don't consider the actual law in place. When a man comes to Jesus and asks, what are the laws I'm supposed to hold to? And he says, like, hey, I've kept all the 10 commandments, which is a lie. But he says, I've kept all the 10 commandments. And he asks, what are the greatest commandments? And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all of your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. This priest is loving David in this moment. Still respectful to God. He wasn't giving him the bread that was freshly on the altar provided for him. But he's loving his neighbor. He's loving David. He's allowing for the preservation of life in this moment. And that's what we've got to do. We have our own sets of rules. We have our own sets of laws. We are obviously in a Christian frame of mind as opposed to a Jewish frame of mind, to where it's not that we have to have this whole checklist of things, but there are still things like don't wear a hat in church, don't have jeans in church. There's things like, do they really matter? And while they can be seen as respect, which I totally understand, or they can be seen as just things that we have done traditionally, which I respect as well. I think some of those traditions are rooted in reverence and respect and things that we should be doing to show glory to God. But are those things keeping others from experiencing the goodness and the glory of God? Maybe you don't know this. I have 2 tattoos, and I had a discussion with Darren when I was brought on board to lead the student ministry. I said, hey, how does Covenant feel about tattoos? There's really nothing I can do about that at this point. They're pretty permanent on my body, but I did intentionally put them in places where I can hide them. But that's one of those things that a lot of people nowadays have tattoos. And no matter what your feelings are on tattoos, whether you agree with them or not, there are a lot of people that if they are tatted up, they got full sleeves, they may not feel comfortable walking into what is seen as more of a traditional congregation. Now, we have contemporary services. I think our building looks a lot more modern, but a lot of people would still see us as a more traditional church. Are we really going to keep someone from feeling comfortable, from being welcomed into our sanctuary, being able to experience the love and power of Christ and this glory of God because of something superficial? That's very Pharisaical. And that is what Jesus is challenging his people with. We can't live that way anymore. We've got to love people and get to the real heart of why we do what we do. I just want to challenge you with that, and really want you to be challenged over the next 4 weeks as we start a new series on idols. Come ready to have your feelings hurt.